You're going to record.
Yeah, we're recording. I got it. I'm not on my own computer, so I got to get the screen here. See. So welcome everybody to the excuse me, Wednesday night winter clinic. Our guest speaker tonight is Bob Brunius, and he's going to talk to us about Headstay Sag. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Bob, and it's all the floor is yours. We're frozen.
Still there, Bob?
On North Sales, and I'm going to just, okay. This fella, Tim Healy, out of North Sales out east, has written some really nice documents for the J70. And I'm sure the J70 sailors have probably all found those already. And it's such a good article that I grabbed some of this stuff and put it in here. I did talk to him on by phone a couple of days ago. I asked his permission if I could plagiarize some of this stuff, and he says, yeah, go ahead, that'd be fine. So I got his permission. So anyway, we have in the photo here a J70 upwind, and you can see the Headstay Sag with it in.
So Bob, we're just seeing your desktop on one side. So if you could drag it, if you got multiple desktops, drag your thing over to the other desktop.
No, I only have one desktop.
Well, you have a guitar on it.
Okay, wrong thing. All right, so.
You had it on there before, Bob.
There we go.
Perfect. Now you're there.
Okay. So this is a J70 upwind, and you can see is my cursor visible?
Yep.
Okay. So it's easily visible here what the Headstay Sag is. And I did a calculation on this based on the beam of the boat, which I know, and gave you ability to scale that. So this amount of sag showing is 6.6 inches just for, now how do okay. I zoomed in here, but now my zoom controls are missing. I know what I can do. No. Oh, I'm sorry, operator error. I don't know how I had a ability to zoom on this. Oh, view modes. All right, it's, oh, here we go. It showed up. There we go. Okay, so besides what we're seeing in this photo, this photo is the visible part of this sag is to leeward, but the headstays also sag aft, which of course in this angle you're not going to be able to see that. So it's going to be actually the total amount of sag is actually more than 6.6 inches. It'll be approximately 6.6 times the square root of 2 if you would, because it's, greater distance, but how much sag you see depends on what angle you're looking, and I think everybody follows that, right? I'll assume we're good. So just to cover a little bit about sail shape, and the sag in the forestay in light air gives you a lot of power, and I can, it's many times I've been out with like a lot of my experiences with Time Bandit, and in distance race you might have some pretty heavy air for a while, and you got everything dialed in for the heavy air settings, and then the wind goes down, and then you're feeling doggy, and it's like, oh, maybe we should readjust here a little bit, and you let go of the backstay, and boom, all of a sudden the boat, it's like a totally different boat. It just so powers up with that letting go of the backstay, and what's happening there is the forestay sags, it powers the jib up. Now, and when it powers it up, it's adding draft to the draft meaning the depth of the curve. And I got a couple, 3 settings here and the percentages are percentages of what you're looking at. It's not what sales don't really get this deep, but you get the idea. And a shallow sail has less lift than a deep sail. But it has less drag as well. So typically when you get a lot of wind and you're overpowered, you need to reduce drag to make good speed, but because the drag becomes the big issue. But when the wind speed is low, the drag is not as big a problem. You need more power. And the way that the power comes from this curvature is the fact that when the wind will attach to the sail and bend. So if you got in the high lift curve, high lift, high drag, the deeper sail, the wind has to bend to stay attached. And as long as it can stay attached, as the wind is curving along on this thing, as it's bending, it's giving up its energy. And that energy is what produces the lift. And whenever the wind has to change directions, it's giving up energy. And one of the things can happen is if it loses too much energy, then it no longer has enough energy left to stay attached. And then your drag really picks up huge. So if you're in a condition where you're, sometimes when it's like really, really light and you got a super curved sail, sometimes the wind won't want to attach to that either. And I'm talking now like 2 knots or 1 knot, or you really got very little wind. There's not enough energy in the wind to attach to a super curved surface. And so when you get down in those light conditions, you might need to go back to a setting where you have a little less draft. So the wind, a lot of times you can tell that because the telltale's off the leash. Now this side of the sail is the luff. The draft is closer to the luff. This is the leach. At any rate, part of the challenge in this whole business is to try to make this flow from one end to the other without being too random about it. But they're not going to be able to succeed in that. I'm going to be random, so if you don't mind. So, to get the draft, you can move your car forward. And it's obvious by looking at the foot of the sail. If this is a cross section looking down from the top, but when you move the car fairly forward, then the distance between the tack, if you would, and the clew gets shorter, and it's going to put more cloth in here, and you get a deeper shape. That works at the foot, and as you progress up the sail, as you get higher in the sail, that impact is less and less. It doesn't really make that much difference once you get up toward the middle of the sail more. But by sagging the forestay, once you get up into the middle of the sail, the forestay will push cloth in toward the middle and add draft to it. When this changes, and I just ask you to look here at the leading edge, this is the luff. This has a different angle than down here. This is a more acute angle to the wind. If the wind is, if this would be like, as the boat's sailing, wind would be coming in this direction, but this entry becomes more acute. And so as the draft is increased and move forward in the sail, the angle of attack is increased. And so the wind actually had this early part of the sail, you want the wind coming in at not too much of an abrupt angle relative to it. So as the angle that the sail has relative to the center line of the boat gets more acute, then you're going to have to fall off to match the wind. And I hope I made that clear. I think everybody understands that basically and I'll just stop here for a second, see if anybody wants to comment or ask a question. Okay, I hear nothing. All right. So then there's also, we have this, the other subject is the where is the draft located? And pretty much the draft location is set by your halyard tension. So if you move the draft forward, as it is in this picture, the draft is now like at a 20% line from the luff to where the peak draft is. You're about 20% here. Here from the luff to the peak draft is about 40%. As you move the draft forward, the angle of attack increases, and you're going to have to fall off in order to get the wind to basically to keep both sets of your telltales flying so that the wind is attached. Now, in this case, the groove that you have for driving is better. The wind will, you can be up or down off of the optimum heading, and it's easier to drive to this. But as the draft goes back, you can actually point higher on this, but the driving gets not as easy. This is just a narrower groove. All right. Okay, so these, I just drew these by hand, and this is a hypothetical jib that we got, and a few thoughts on this. These are the load lines where, and actually some sails have these, actually they exist this way in the sail, depends on who built your sail. Some panel sails, it's not obvious, some are, but as you pull halyard tension, typically, like say for example, on a new sail, you get a new sail up and you pull and you get it all set on the boat and you tension it where just right, so the draft is in the proper location where you want the draft to be. You'll see some horizontal wrinkles in here, and that's kind of like the new sail built extra cloth in there just for to grow into. Because what'll happen is you pull on the halyard, most of the force initially is going to be on a new sail in particular, you're going to be on these lines here. And as you tension those by pulling the head away from the tack, those lines are going to move closer to the luff. So they'll be pushing cloth forward, and they'll be pulling cloth away from the leech. So this is when you pull on the head, the halyard, then that's going to be pulling draft forward into the sail. It doesn't necessarily change the amount of draft, but it changes the location to move it forward. But now if you were to do is ease your forestay, then allowing the forestay to drop back into the sail, then the forestay will get a curve to it. But so it's going to push extra cloth into here. But now these lines are already tensioned. So say like this line and this line, they're already got a shape. They're not going anywhere. You're based on the halyard tension you got. So if you drop some forestay in here, there's a lot of extra cloth, and that extra cloth is going to put extra depth into your sail in this region. And the end result is that the draft will actually have moved forward. It'll be deeper and more forward. And the old sails, what happens was you wear the sail out, these lines stretch, and you have to increasingly pull harder and harder halyard to get to the same point where the draft is located. This way, just the way it goes. But also I've noticed is like you get an old sail where the belly is back in here already, because these things they're stretched enough, you can't get the draft to move forward, so you get a bit of belly hanging out in here. But if you put a lot of sag in the forestay, it pushes a lot of cloth up in this area, and the effect is that actually the draft is moved forward, and now you get a very deep sail, but the shape is not too bad. Its shape, starts to look usable again. And so that's a good sail for light air, but you can't ever use a sail like that in heavy air. You'd be just screwed on it because it draft when, you know, and of course, as the wind comes up, it blows the draft back also at the same time. And another interesting thing is that now, like, so if you change the tension on the head, so the way you would sag this is the head would move, or the attachment on the mast where the head is attached would move forward, and that will ease the tension on the forestay. But the halyard tension will remain relatively constant throughout. You might think, well, if the head gets closer to the tack, that should ease the halyard tension too, and it does a little bit. But you got to remember that the sail is going to stretch more than a steel stay, and then you also got the halyard that's all the way back down here. So there's a lot of bunginess to the whole head sail and the halyard built in there. So as you ease the stay, the tension on the halyard doesn't change nearly as much in direct correlation. But another thing though you can do is, if you're trying to ease, if you came in where you were pretty heavy winded, you got a lot of breeze, and you had quite a bit of halyard on, and now you're easing up and you're shifting gears, and you ease the backstay and you let out the main sheet, and you're looking for your forestay to sag, and it's just not like sagging at all. You might have, as soon as you let the halyard go, you will suddenly get it, because what happens if you got your halyard too tight on the jib, the halyard the jib and halyard are carrying all the load that the forestay used to carry. So if you're trying to get the sag, you're going to have to ease the halyard at this, probably at the same time, or you're not going to get the effect that you want. Okay, and here I got another little drawing. It's a little redundant. This guy is now. So I had little things that showed up here for zooming in and out, and they're not doing it for me now. Okay, there we go. So the first drawing is maximum sag and loose halyard, a few wrinkles. And this is, you move your jib car lead forward, and here's where you can get yourself the maximum draft in your sail. And that'd be the most powerful position for light air. And again, I had mentioned also, one of the things that can happen is if you're like ultra super light air, I mean, if you're looking like 1 knot out there, the wind might not want to attach to your sail when it gets really deep like that. And so there is kind of a diminishing return on it. You might need to undo some of it when it's super light. The medium air, and it's all the stuff, the jib lead comes back a little bit, a little more. You're going to be trimming the main a little harder. You might touch the backstay, and it takes some of the sag out. And then for heavy air, we're going to have to tighten the halyard up. A lot of backstay. The headstay sag is the minimum, and we got our car back.
So, Bob, you want to talk about the telltales flowing 100% versus 80%? What's that mean?
Well, like in light air, generally on the main, in my opinion on this or my experience is that in light air, you want to have everything everywhere flying 100%. And particularly the leech, on the jib, you want to have it flying. Now, as you get into, when you're starting to get toward fully powered and where your boat is, like 80% of hull speed or something, you're getting enough power. Certainly the inside telltales on the jib, you can, depending on the water, it depends too on the water state. If you've got really flat water, you can live with a lot of stalled inside telltales on the jib. And then when it's heavy air and you're really overpowered, those telltales are just, usually sailing, so they're checked out on the leading. But you really want to have, the ones on the leech flying all the time. And does anybody have a different opinion on that, or would I open this up to anybody want to add something to that thought? Okay. Okay, so now here's the thing we're talking about here is that the angle of attack, when you sag the and the way this shows, it's not easy to see necessarily, but if you can imagine that you're looking down from the top and the forestay is sagging to leeward, then what happens is the cord of the jib now has gotten itself aligned a little more closer to the boat, and you can actually, it's effectively allows you to point a little higher. It's the angle of attack changes, and it happens in the middle of the sail because the maximum sag is in the middle of the sail. So it's a little bit because if you're thinking you're going to rotate the sail to change the angle of attack, one thing people do, and you can do it easily on these J70s, is you use the windward sheet to pull the tack in toward the center line of the boat. You move it in, and that allows you to point a little higher. Well, the same thing happens by allowing the middle of the luff to fall off. It rotates the sail the same as if you're pulling the clew in, and it so you get yourself, you can actually sail. In the first slide up here, very beginning, the point, it says often point higher, and that's what it's about. So if you look, this has gone to leeward, so it's like the as this goes to leeward, it's like an equivalent thing would be like you get to move that. It's be like the angle in here be like moving the leech the same amount in toward the boat, which I think you instinctively think if you sheet in closer, you're going to be able to point higher, and that's the end result for that, and that's what happens. But that ability to point higher only happens in, from the power that's happening in here. The effect of that doesn't happen up here, and you might, the effect is not uniform. Now, one of the things on this effect happens the same on a spinnaker, and it's somewhat counterintuitive, and it didn't really dawn on me till Wally Lum explained it to me one time, but it's like in light air, or if you're really close reaching with a kite and you think, oh, we're trying to hold this like 50-degree apparent, some really close angle that's really tough, and you think, oh, in order to point with this, I need to pull the pole down, like, pull the tack of an asymmetrical down. But it's not really, what that does is it tensions it from head to tack and pulls this in, where what you really want in order to point higher is let this fall off. So we found like with Time Bandit or our other little boat that we've sailed, is with the asymmetrical is if you're really trying to point as high as you can, sometimes it helps to allow the tack out. See the tack line, you let the tack line up maybe 6 inches or a foot or something like that. And it's counterintuitive, but what that does is the leading edge of the sail falls off. And as you keep that, the clue of it pulled in, you get a closer sheeting angle. And so I don't know if your experience matches that, or I hear nothing. Okay. But there is this angle of attack issue. So if when you let in light air, when you letting that jib stay sag, you can actually point at the end result is you can end up pointing higher with it and be powered up more. So,
When
okay,
else
so
would you ease the tack on a spinnaker?
Yeah.
That makes a whole lot of sense, and that's a new thing for me to learn. So when else would you ease the tack?
Yeah.
well, the other time you would ease it for an A sail is if the other end of it is if you get deep enough, if you're starting to get deep enough that the sail will rotate to weather, then you could start letting it out and it helps it rotate further. It gives it, if the wind is attached to the sail and you're trying to sail like 160 apparent, really deep with an A sail, we let the tack up a lot, sometimes way up, and the sail will rotate hugely to weather. It helps to have weight on the weather rail to keep the boat leaned that way. And you can get yourself 5 degrees deeper just by letting the tack up. But it does make it more unstable. And the other problem, sometimes the problem we've gotten into with it is that we forget to put it down before we jibe. And then in the jibe, it wraps itself under the pole and then it's really fucked up. So you do need to pull that tack back down before you jibe.
Hey, Bob, so we've eased the tack quite a bit in the deep downwind situations, but not so much to point better. How much are you, on Time Bandit, have you eased it to actually point when you've got a shoot up?
Well, in light air?
In light air.
Yeah, well, for pointing, it's like okay, so we're trying to go like 50 degrees apparent. And okay, or even sometimes we've been able, depends on the age of the sail and the wind speed, but if the wind is like moderate, maybe 8 knots or less, well, it has to be like even 5 knots, something like that. Yeah, we can let it up 12 inches and the sail you can sail closer to the wind with it.
Wow, thanks.
Okay, so this stuff is copied from Tim Healy, and it basically is what we've talked about. But I'm just gonna, you guys can read it. Are you able to read it? It's full screen for me, but I'll just talk through here. So there he's talking about the different water conditions in flat water. And we want to go ahead and sag the headstay. And it's the easiest, most direct method to create depth in the jib. The middle of the jib luff has a better angle of attack to the wind because of the angle of attack and the inboard rotation of the mid leech. You will be able to point slightly higher without luffing or losing flow over the front of the jib. Okay. When you set this up correctly, it's important as ever to make sure the jib leech and telltales are flowing 99 to 100% of the time. Speaks to Ken's question. So the airflow stays attached to the jib. Okay. Sheeting in periodically. Okay, sheet in periodically until you see the jib leech telltales stall slightly and ease out. Okay, so you're treating your jib a little bit like a spinnaker trimmer here. So you're bringing them in until you get the stall and let it out. I mean, that was we played that game a lot on the soling. It was always, Barb is always trimming the jib just to see where the stall is on the leech telltale. Okay, well, okay, so he speaks to this a little later about this. I'm gonna get into how we haven't talked about how we get necessarily the sag we want, and he's talking about this a little bit here. Points, okay. All right, so now when you get into chop, then the picture changes a little bit. And when you get if there's a lot of stuff going on, you'll see a lot of pumping on the mast, and it's gonna like just the motion. When you get sails that are moving around because of either people walking on the boat or waves are bumping the boat and stuff, and it's not a lot of energy in the wind because it's light wind, then you're going to lose attachment all the time. It's just going to become, the wind will be becoming attached to the sails, and it's slow. So to stabilize stuff, you're going to need to do is pull this backstay in to keep the rig straight. And there is some trick to this. I'll talk about it later that you can pull if you're on a distance race that would help on this. So you want to, at any rate, you're going to need, once the chop is over, he's saying, release the backstay again and go back to the more saggy thing. And on boats with in-haulers, weather sheeting to increase pointability, careful not to overdo it. Jib leach can become prone to stalling. And stalling on the jib leach is not fast. I don't think it's fast ever, but in particularly in waves, he's saying it's not fast. Okay, so moving on. Any other questions on that? Okay, so in this photo here, it's just a nice photo. It's a beautiful, nice shape to this upper draft stripe. It's the draft locate depth, maximum depth's about in here. Draft, nice smooth curvature forward. It's a beautiful sail, pretty new. But you can see here from this, you can estimate what the amount of sag is. Now, but this is a line that they drew in there. But if you wanted to do is inspect this, make it more easy to inspect. If you took a jib halyard and just attached it to the deck for it, if you have a spare jib halyard, or if you took a spin halyard and attached it forward and tightened it up good, then you could have a look at it, and you get to see exactly how much sag you're getting. And it would just sometimes it's nice to sail around with that just to get a feel for what your rig is set up for, how the shrouds are set, and for whatever tensions you have for the day. So things that produce sag, and the things that induce it, well, for one thing, if you didn't have any backstay or anything else connected aft of where the mast is stepped, the thing would fall over forward, right? So that would be a lot of sag. But there's some other things that produce sag. The more wind you have in the jib, the more sag you're going to get of the forestay. Sheeting pressure on the jib. So, the jib sheet is always an angle that intersects the forestay somewhere. I mean, if you look at the straight line of your jib sheet, it's going to intersect your forestay somewhere, and it's pulling on the sail, and it's going to be pulling that stay in that way. Gravity, especially if you're heeled, gravity will produce some sag, and gravity will, in the light airs, depending on as you heel the boat, it will change where that sag is going. Whether it's, if your boat is standing up, the sag might be a little bit more straight aft, but if you're leaning over, then the sag is going to go more out. Like if you're heeling to leeward and really light air, and you're heeling to leeward, then that sag will go away from the center line of the boat more than it would be if the boat is standing up. And when that happens, then you can point a little higher again. And that's another reason for heeling the boat to leeward. It helps that sail get a little better attitude on it. Another thing is mast steps. If you have a keel step mast like a J120, then there are blocking that you can do at the deck and it induces some pre-bend. And so if you got blocking in their aft of the a mast, then it's going to push that try to push the mast forward, which will give you a little more sag. Or another way that can happen is if the step is movable, where it's actually stepped on the above the keel, you can, like on the J120, you can move that forward and aft, and then it's kind of levered against the deck, and you can change. It will actually change where the top of the mast wants to naturally be. Then another thing that you can do is fracculation, and I was just going to talk about that a little bit. And and I've done this with the J120 a number of times, and you could even do it conceivably if you had over-tensioned your shrouds for the weather and you didn't want to retune the shrouds. But if we can take the spin halyard and take that forward, and what we've done is just attached it to one of the tack line that's on the pole, or on the bowsprit, and you can tack it anywhere on the boat for that matter, but forward of where the jib is attached, and you grind that halyard in tight, and it relieves the tension on the forestay, and it will sag. And it's quite effective actually, but it's a lot of fucking around. You gotta send crew up there, and it's not something you do if you think conditions are going to change soon, or if you've got the leg changes or something. But if you're on a Van Isle 360 and you got a 30-mile day and it's blowing 4 and you got a long ways to go, if you pull that, you can pull that forward. And then the other problem, that we talked about just a little bit earlier, was where if you start getting some waves going on and it's disturbing your mast and it's rocking and shaking your jib around, when you have a lot of, like, you let the backstay completely off and you want to get all powered up, and then you get a little bit of chop, then it's disturbing the jib, and it's not fast. But if you fracculate, then you pull that mast forward artificially with a spinnaker halyard, and it actually stabilizes the mast then too. So you'll see a lot of less commotion in the forestay as it's moving around.
Hey, Bob.
Yeah.
In the couple slides ago, when you took a stay forward to look at how much Headstay Sag you had, you lined up a jib. That's sort of like, I don't know what the word is, oxymoron. But if you tension up that stay, you're gonna produce more Headstay Sag.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
That goes right with your fracculator.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, it depends on how hard you get at it, but you're right. It would, that's exactly what's going on there.
Go ahead.
I was just going to mention there are other ways to fracculate. You can, actually, if you've got a shoot up, then you can put some jib sheet on and pull it forward that way. So, yeah, just alternative ways to fracculate.
Yeah. Well, we got in trouble one time on a big broach where we had fracculated heavily, and we, downwind, and we really fracculated exactly like you mentioned there, Chris. And then we got, we actually fell in a big wave hole. It was like the opposite of waves, like suddenly this part just before Race Rocks where there wasn't any water. And we fell in this hole, and the kite spun around. But what happened is the forestay was so slack, like the forestay was just not, the forestay actually wrapped around the fracculator like 4 times. Unbelievable. And it just fractured the whole thing. It just splintered it up and down and then the kite wrapped around that, and the splinters of the tough luff shot through the sail, and it was an unbelievable mess. It was just crazy. Anyway, that's a sidetrack. But that's one thing, if you frackalate like that, you'll find your forestay is just a big sloppy thing, you know. And if you had, when you're doing that, if you got one of those spinnaker nets, then that would tension up that forestay and make it sit still. And it also keeps you from having the kite wrap around it too, in case you wipe out. But I think anytime future we go through race rocks in the middle of the night, we're going to have one of those spinnaker nets up. Chris, do you have one of those, or have you used them?
Yeah, we did going to Hawaii, and we lost one too, and that was a sad day.
You lost the net, or you lost the kite?
We lost the net,
Oh, yeah.
and so we really had to pay a lot of attention.
Okay, so then what reduces sag, of course, is backstay tension. If you have a check stay or running backstay, anything that will rock the mast aft is going to reduce sag. Main sheet tension, your shrouds. Now, for most of the boats we're dealt with, they usually are somewhat swept, so that the shroud attachment to the boat is aft of the line where a thwart ship of where the mast comes either stepped on the deck or comes out. And so if your shrouds are attached aft somewhat, then you're going to get tension on the forestay with that. And we have had some boats out here sailing. I've been on like a Hunter before, and they just got totally like crazy swept shrouds, and like there's nothing you can do with that forestay. It's just totally hard as a rock. You know, the boat doesn't start being a boat until 8 knots. And I don't know what you do with that kind of thing, but you know, a little bit of a sweep is fine. But there are boats out there, especially some of the older boats, that the shrouds come down and attached right on the same athwartship line that the mast is stepped on, so that that shroud tension is not going to affect the forestay sag at all. It won't be party to the game. You guys follow that? All right, okay, I'll assume
Yes.
so. Okay, so jib halyard tension, as you pull on the jib halyard, that's going to act as if it's the forestay. I mean, you get enough tension on your halyard, suddenly it is now the forestay, because it's sort of like the bolt rope that's in the jib is now your forestay, and the forestay is not the forestay. And so you can remove the sag of the sail by excessive jib halyard. It's not a good move either. On the soling, there was so much control on that if you made an error and dumped your the tension on the stay completely, if you had a lot of tension on the stay and you made the mistake of just dumping it off, all of a sudden you just stretched your brand new jib into oblivion. You know, there's a little danger that can roll in there on that. So, okay, so here we got a J70 that happened to be in the lot a couple of days ago, and I took a photo of it. And I've measured these distances. We'll see them here in a second. The distance from the forestay to the mast, and from the mast to where the step is. And now this distance here, like I was saying, is this how much sweep you got. And some boats, the shrouds attach here and there's no sweep at all. And some of them are like way back here and it's like crazy. And okay, so that affects the sag and the forestay where that's attached. You got the main sheet that comes down here, and that's the main, obviously all together, pulling in on here, and then the backstay. Now for this J70, the J that is on the spec sheet of the boat, the J is 92.5 inches. The S, what I called the S for like mast step sweep, is 18 inches. The mainsail is, the sheet is pulling down here at 111 inches, and the backstay is at 162 inches. It's actually right about in here. Okay, so now the impact of these is sort of like this calculation. So the shrouds at 18 divided by 92 point, and this is relative. It's not totally, the model could be better. I just quite a simplification, but so you got two upper shrouds. Now there are lower shrouds, but the lower shrouds are less and they attach only halfway, not even halfway, they're down here. So their impact is on this is not so much, but it's some, but I just ignored it in here. But for the purpose of this, you get about, and there's two shrouds though. So if you get for tension that you have on the shroud. So if I put in 500 pounds of tension on here, you're going to see about, call it 40%, you're going to see about 200 pounds of force on the forestay. And that 200 pounds is now fighting the elements that produce sag, and with the wind, the things we listed up there that produce it, the sheeting pressure from the jib, the gravity, and whatever else we got that would induce sag. So with 500 pounds, you're getting on the shrouds settings, then you're going to get, well, 40% of 200 pounds. Okay. Now, for the main sheet, since its distance from the mast to here is greater than this distance, you're actually going to see a little more pressure on the forestay than the actual main sheet. And so the main sheet, if you figure it's 4 to 1 purchase, and you pull by your hand, you pull 50 pounds. So you get like 200 pounds of force on the main sheet. It's got a little bit of a gain here because it's got more leverage. So you're 120%. So you're about the same as the shrouds, in this example. In the backstay, you got even more gain because it's got more leverage. It's acting further back. So you're going to get about 175. And if you on there, you got like 12 to 1 purchase. And if you pull, sometimes you really pull on that thing in heavy air, but if you pull on it at all, you really get, some tension on the forestay. And you can, in heavy air, when you want to minimize your sag, because you want to depower, you're pulling tons of backstay, and you're getting, with the amount of purchase on there, and if you're pulling up there more than 50 pounds, so you probably, you can probably be getting on a J70 maybe 700 to 1,000 pounds of force on that thing, and you're going to really pull the. Of course, when you're pulling on this, you're bending the upper part of the mast. You're bending it, and actually, I think before I took this photo, I pulled on the backstay kind of hard just for the grins of it. And you can see that we got some bend in the mast here already. It bends the upper part more than any other part. Okay, so then I'm going to ask a question and see who wants to answer this thing. But, in light of this analysis, if you pull on the boom vang, how much is that going to impact the forestay tension? I'll open that up to somebody who want to answer the question.
It eases more stag.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that the boom vang is attached at the mast. Its effort is totally isolated in the mast. It does not rock the mast back, and to the extent that when you pull on the vang, it will allow you to reduce the main sheet, which it will, because it's vang sheeting. So you're sheeting the main with the vang, and then you don't have to sheet using the main sheet as much, which reduces the tension on the forestay, and you get more sag. Okay, I guess I'm done with this idea, unless somebody wants another further comments. Okay, so this is, I pulled this from Tim Healy again. How much sag do you want? And it's sort of like in some ways, you know, there is some limit to it. I mean, you can get crazy sag and there's some issues. But one of the things to think about, and the J70s, all the sails are identical, but when you get, you know, perf boats or whatever, and you go out and you buy a sail, the head sail maker is going to have a amount of sag in mind. And if you get a good one that comes out and fiddles around with your boat, he'll actually do some stuff just to see how much your headstay is sagging, and then we'll have it kind of for the wind range. And for every, you know, every sail might have a specific sweet spot for the wind that you're designing it for, but it's going to assume a certain amount of headstay sag. And so you kind of want to do is target that amount of sag, and you target it by adjusting your shrouds, basically, you know, to and your backstay and whatever. But that's one of the factors that goes into how much do you want. So if you're underpowered, you want more sag. Number 2. Number 3, if you're overpowered, you want less sag. You want to depower the sail, so you want to get rid of that forestay sag. Okay, and here number 4 is kind of an interesting one. I hadn't thought of this before, and I credit this Tim Healy with this thought, but specifically for the J70, that when you're set up for light air, when you sheet on fully, or say you are sheeted on, then and you ease the main off quite a lot or all, then you should see the sag change about an inch, or he's calling 2 inches is what he said, an inch to 2 inches. So you want to see as you're changing your main sheet, you want to be able to observe that forestay sag changing, moving in and out. If you're not seeing that, then you probably got your shrouds too tight, because the shrouds are dominating the thing. And this is, of course, saying that you don't have any backstay at all. We don't want any backstay. Oh, and by the way, on the J70, I was figuring out, just sailing with Boris, that the course adjustment on that backstay is just a rope that he got on there, or line, and you can, goes to the one side and you can adjust it. But really that little trapeze thing that slides down the triangle thing that you pull in, that has a fairly narrow range. And so you want to set that up when you're sailing for the day by changing the fine, or the course adjust rope on, if you know what, you all know what I mean, Jimmy? Jimmy, you know what I'm talking about? Maybe left. Okay.
No,
So
I gave you a thumbs up. Yeah, it's right on.
Yeah, I didn't see the thumbs up. All I can see is my document here. So if you don't have that pulled down on the J70, if you don't have that thing tight enough, if that little movable car thing slides down to the bottom, there's no amount of pull that you're going to get any more power on it. You kind of run out of range after it gets halfway down that track. So you want to leave the dock. If you got heavy air, you want to leave the dock with a little bit of tension just right out of the chute. If it's super light air or light air, you don't want anything on there. So you basically got to really retie it so that it's loose.
Roger that. Yeah, we learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
All good.
Okay, so too much headstay sag will cause the leech to rotate inboard too far, becoming extra sensitive to sheet tension and stalling too easily. So it's that old rotate thing. But on this one, I would think that maybe just if you got a lot of sag, that you could actually compensate for this issue by just not sheeting quite as hard. And your point should still be pretty good, because you're getting the extra point by having the sag, push out there. And you also don't want to see a knuckle in the front of the jib. So you want to remove that. You don't want to, especially in light air. I used to like these knuckles sort of stuff on with a big overwrapping head jib higher in the wind range for the jib. and it seemed like the knuckle was pretty cool. The boat was very fast, and but when you have a knuckle in light air, that's not good because the wind is not powerful enough to really want to bend abruptly over a knuckle. It's kind of counterproductive. So you might want to, you can get to air. And now he's talking about ultralight here. Oh yeah, the luff can oscillate. That's my words. That's not Tim's. I added that in there. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that, but if you like fraculate the jib and you're really in light air and you're trying to get as much sag as you can, that front end of the luff will start just to oscillate in and out, just become unstable, and then you have to take that out. Now, okay, here's another thing about the older sails. I don't know if I talked about this, but if you do get an old sail that you've kind of given up on, but say it was, and over the years, I've bought sails that had sweet spots of 5 and 8 and 12, and I've had too many sails. But say you get one that is a higher end jib in the range, but it's gotten kind of old and baggy. But if you take it even in lighter air, if you sag that forestay into it, suddenly you look at it and you think, man, that's a beautiful shape. It's that dog will hunt, but but if you go back to the higher end wind range, then it's no good. And so essentially the sail's no good. You don't want it on the boat. But if you're out cruising around, sometimes you get these sails and you can play with them, and they're kind of fun to mess with that way. So here's this boat this is my last slide here. And this thing's got a fair amount of heel going on here, and there's some waves going on. It looks like there's some, they got pretty good pressure, I would guess. And so we're looking here at the forestay sag and the shape of this sail, and I'm just put it out there to see if anybody would diagnose this thing or want to comment on what they think they should do with the trim, or maybe it's just fine exactly. It's really good how it is. If anybody'd like to, you see it okay?
Hey, but yeah, I see that. It looks like they got too much jib halyard on there.
Draft is real forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I would say too. Draft is too far forward.
Looks like draft is forward, and all the shape is in the very, very front, and then it's flat towards the back.
Yeah. Yeah, right away I'd be trying to get the halyard has to come off. And if there's some way to get rid of some of that sag too, get rid of some of the draft, flatten the entry, because if you just right now, this thing takes a right-hand bend here.
Right. Yeah, it's
boom. But if the draft was to pull forward here a little bit, if the sag of the jib of the forestay were to come out a little bit, that would pull this forward and it would correct some of that. But I think you're going to have to solve it with easing the halyard.
Yeah. I've never seen anything that dramatic before. That's where'd you get that photo?
Oh, I was looking around different querying for this thing, and this one popped out, and I thought, this is one that is an interesting picture.
You can tell it's old school by the birdie at the top of the mast. That's way old school.
At any rate, but it looks like fun, it's sort of like, I wouldn't mind being in this picture. This looks like a nice day, good sailing, a nice cruising boat. That's my presentation on the Sag, folks.
Awesome.
That was great, Bob.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Bob.
Oh, thank you. That was great.
Thank you, Bob. So we've been trying to record these winter clinics these last 2 times, and we'll let you know in our weekly email when we get it finished and posted up onto the YouTube like last time. So great presentation. Any more questions for Bob on Headstay Sag? I learned a lot. Thank you. I was actually able to identify what was going on in the cell. I'm impressed. Woohoo!
Thanks, Bob. You simplified it down. It's nice.
Yeah, Bob, that was really well done. This is a super difficult, very challenging topic to discuss in person when you're on the boat, let alone on Zoom. This is you really prepared well and came through with just some big physics to support everything that makes things work the way they do on a sailboat. So very well done, Bob. If I could add one more comment that might I hope help to tie it together a little bit, especially for those of you that have been doing so much sailing over these past few months. The comments you made were so spot on, and I appreciate that you made them light, medium, and heavy air. So when the boat's underpowered and light air, I think it's really important to remember, as you mentioned, that backstay has to be loose enough for something that we've been working on with the J70 crowd, and that is that what we call active trimming and steering. And when you set the boat up just like you described in light air, backstay eased, looking for a little headstay sag, when you're looking for a little bit of power, you can actually ease the main sheet just a couple of inches. It not only opens up and helps flow across the main, so it helps the boat accelerate, but as you bear away when you ease that main sheet, just tying it all together anyhow, the jib sags a little bit more, so you've got more power in the jib, more power in the main, and you keep the slot open. Then as the boat accelerates and hits full speed, we can squeeze that main sheet back on a few inches, and the good skipper can point the boat up just a little bit more and really keep everything in sync. As you squeeze that main sheet on, that pulls the main sheet out of the slot, that flattens out the jib, presents flatter, more efficient shapes, less drag to the wind, and the boat you can go into your glide and point mode upwind. So you can really take, what I'm trying to say is you can take everything you just shared with us straight out of the physics book and apply it to what we've been trying to accomplish with our sailing these past few months, and tie it all together into your point mode and your foot mode. And just, it really filled in a lot of gaps that I think a lot of people out here who were trying hard to learn. There's so much to learn. We have all these critical pieces of the puzzle that we're tying together and gluing together. And you really did a nice job of pulling it all together with the Headstay Sag talk. It's a very challenging topic. You did a beautiful job. So thank you for that. And I hope that everybody kind of sleeps on it. And next time you get to go sailing, you can try some of these things in light air, medium, and heavy air. And if this does record successfully, I think it's worth reviewing with anybody who we race with and against on our boats, so that we can all kind of discuss this further and try it on the water. This is really high value stuff. So thank you very much, Bob.
Thank you, Ron.
All right, if there's no other questions, thank you again, Bob, and everybody enjoy the rest of your Wednesday evening.